Well, we've got a lot of people right now who are struggling around the world to do that without suffering tremendous persecution. There have been reports circulating today of an attack on a Catholic school in Nigeria. It's resulted in the abduction of some 52 children along with the staff. It took place early in the morning at the St. Mary's School in Nigeria's Niger state, and that follows a similar incident earlier this week where armed attackers reportedly kidnapped some 25 girls from a boarding school in the Kebbi state of Nigeria. And there's more and more and more attention being drawn to this West African country, and thanks in part to the Trump administration's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern. And with Nigeria under the microscope, let's all continue to pray that we may soon see an end to all the targeting of Christians there. And joining me now to dive further into this and more is Sam Brownback. He's a former U.S. Senator, Kansas governor, and the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. Ambassador Brownback, always great to have you on Washington Watch. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, happy to join you, Jody. And all this tough news, I do hope everybody's getting ready also as well for a good Thanksgiving. We've got a lot to be thankful for, but we got a lot of Christians around the world that aren't in such good positions.
We sure are. And listen, before we get to Nigeria, I wanted to start off, if I could, real quickly with China. Don't know if you were able to hear the previous segment. We had Gordon Chang on, and we were talking about how the Chinese Communist Party and its military forces are reportedly preparing the entire country for a future war with the United States over Taiwan. But there's another war going on right now in China, and that's the war on religion. And we've had a congressional hearing that you testified at just yesterday. So I wanted to begin there with your thoughts on that hearing and what was highlighted in that.
Well, what I highlighted and other people pointed out as well is that China is at war with faith. We've known that, and that's been the case since the communists took over 70 years ago. But there is a prospect for us here if we will look at religious freedom as a national security issue and not just as a human right. We can back and should back the religious people within China, and they're our greatest ally. And Jody, one of the things I said yesterday, and I firmly believe, is that the Chinese Communist Party fears religious freedom in their own country more, much more than they fear our aircraft carriers or our nuclear weapons. They view that as the real threat to their dominance and their control at home.
That is amazing to think of it from that perspective. So from that lens, through that lens, Ambassador, how should the U.S. respond to the rising persecution there in China?
We should respond by wholeheartedly backing the people of faith, of all faiths, throughout China. I mean, we're backing the people that are opposed to our greatest enemy in the world, which is the Chinese Communist Party, not the Chinese people, Chinese Communist Party. And we should back the Muslim Uyghurs. We should back the Tibetan Buddhists. We should back the Falun Gong. We should back the Christians that are being persecuted and increasingly taken as hostages in their negotiation with the United States. We should develop a national security strategy to support religious freedom inside of China. These are things that we can do. And I laid out yesterday a series of specific items within each of these faith communities that we could support that would show our support for religious freedom and would critically undermine the Chinese Communist Party and their authority if we can get some air and oxygen to these religious communities.
And therein lies what you were talking about as approaching this whole thing as a national security issue. The longer the Christian community, the stronger they are in China and other faiths, I suppose, the better that is for us.
Absolutely. Look at religious freedom for us is a cornerstone human right. You don't have a United States of America without religious freedom at our founding and guaranteeing free exercise. People came here to freely practice their faith. That's what the pilgrims came for to start off with. The communists look at it exactly opposite. They look at religious freedom as an existential threat to their control. Well, we should do the very American thing and support religious freedom within that country, standing for their human right. And it's something that it will really undermine the Chinese communists.
Excellent point. Okay, Ambassador, if I can kind of shift gears with you, let's turn back to Nigeria. What happened there this morning, I think if an attack and a kidnapping like what took place in Nigeria today had happened in the U.S. or somewhere else in the world for that matter, there would be absolute shock. But unfortunately, this is not out of the ordinary in Nigeria, is it? What's going on here?
Unfortunately, not at all. Praise God for President Trump, who's raised the issue of Nigeria back on the global stage and pointed out these horrific situations. It's the most deadly place in the world to be a Christian today. And you saw these examples just today. The president redesignated them a country of particular concern. We'd done that in the first Trump, just did it in the second. Now we need to follow it up with actions. We need to get in place a situation there that can guarantee that diverse population in Nigeria that they can live quiet and peaceful lives. We need to really work at this in a long-term basis and raise it up. I've been co-hosting and working with different groups of Nigerian activists about this, what sort of things we can do. There are a number of things that can be engaged with, but we do need to act. We can't just say this is a problem anymore. We're going to have to act on this to be able to stop the carnage that keeps happening there.
Excellent point. So now we have them designated as a country of particular concern. President Trump himself went after them for what he described as the mass murder, or mass slaughter, I think were his words, of Christians. We've had U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, held an event highlighting the ongoing violence there in Nigeria. But you say we need action, not just talk. So what needs to take place? We are certainly rising the attention of what's there, increased attention of what's going on in Nigeria. How does that go hand in hand with what type of particular actions that we should be doing next?
It does. You got to raise the awareness and people's willingness to act, but you could clearly start out with a series of very targeted sanctions against the actors in Nigeria, the leaders of the actors in Nigeria, to targeted sanctions against them. You could do very targeted sanctions against the Nigerian economy of exports that they have coming to the United States to show we're not going to tolerate this anymore. But ultimately, you really have got to get at that security situation on the ground for Christians, particularly in the middle belt and northern part of the country. That's where the carnage is really happening. And we've got to be able to provide, have people providing protection to these Christian communities that are there so that they're not attacked. Right now, they get attacked and they're virtually defenseless, and the military and the government doesn't respond either timely or they respond fecklessly, and it just keeps taking place. So ultimately, we've got to get at that specific security situation in Nigeria.
Wow. All right, let me switch gears with you again and take this discussion a little step further. As you well know, President Trump met with the Saudi Crown Prince in Washington earlier this week. And the Saudi prince communicated to Trump his desire for some increased American involvement in managing the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. But, and here's the question that goes to what we're talking about and broadens it. There were some Republicans even who argued that the president needs to focus less on foreign policy and more on domestic issues What's your take on that, given the type of foreign issues that we're experiencing right now?
Well, you can do both, and this president does do both. And we're going to need to continue to do both. Sudan is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. I've traveled in the country multiple times. They think in this current crisis they're in, 400,000 people have died. And the president has thankfully agreed to step up. Now, I presume in his discussions with the Saudi prince, they're talking about the Saudis invested $1 trillion into the United States. That's going to help our economy. And the Saudis in return are asking, Mr. President, help solve this problem. To me, that's helping the U.S. economy. If you're helping somebody that's going to put $1 trillion investment in the U.S. economy, and we can do it. We've done it before on Sudan. We had this split of the northern part from South Sudan. The Christians were in the south, the Muslims in the north, and that's helped. It's been difficult. It's had its difficulties at its early stages. But I think really the president, who's been a massive peacemaker around the world, this is something we can step up and we can do, and he can do both. And in fact, by doing this, is doing both.
Great point. So let me ask you this: the State Department is, at least some are stating that the State Department is giving more attention to violations against God-given rights than they are fabricated rights, like the right to abort babies or mutilate gender-confused children and so forth. You have been for a long time a phenomenal champion on religious freedom and life and a host of other things. But how important is it to make clear what rights are God-given, what rights are inalienable, especially when there are so many fabricated so-called rights that conflict with inalienable rights? How important is this discussion?
It's a critical discussion to have. When Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, he held an Inalienable Rights Commission and to try to get at the very issue. And the long and the short of it, to me, what we should be doing is we should say those rights that are in the UN Charter of Human Rights that the entire world has signed on to, those are your basic human rights, and those are the ones we're going to protect. And all these other items, we can have discussions about them if you want to have, but they're not in the core of what the world has agreed to. The right to an abortion is not in the UN Charter of Human Rights. The right to change a gender is not in the Charter of UN Human Rights. Let's go back to the basic document that the world agreed to on human rights, and let's build off of that. And fundamental within it, Article 18, is religious freedom of people being able to choose their own faith or to change their faith however they might choose themselves. It's the human right of the soul to be able to do this. And it's a fundamental, I believe, cornerstone human right that we really need to elevate and make it into a national security issue.
That's why we love you so much. Your stance over the years so powerful. We've got just a little over a minute left. So your take on this: the role of Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom is currently empty. President Trump's nominee, former North Carolina Congressman Mark Walker, he's waited now more than 7 months for Senate confirmation. Your thoughts on this?
He needs to get confirmed. We need a person in that position, with human rights and religious freedom in particular being such a fundamental issue right now in a place like Nigeria and that entire region of the Sahel, in a place like China, where it's our best tool, I believe, against the Chinese Communist Party. You need your point person, and that's that ambassador role for international religious freedom. I really want to urge the Senate to take that nomination up, get the confirmation hearing done, put him on a vote yet this year so you can get your point person inside the administration to start working and get him out traveling around the world to work hands-on on a number of these situations that the president has elevated, thankfully, but we need people to do the follow-through.
Absolutely. Ambassador Sam Brownback, it's always an honor to speak with you, always an honor to have you on Washington Watch. Thank you so much for coming on and for having such a bold stance for so long. God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.